the opportunities provided by landscape, therefore, to address the question of the bigger, larger scale territory, have therefore been used in the recent past to try to see how these tools and techniques can be utilized, to be applied, to be thought of as a method, as a way of now dealing with questions of urbanization. So the relationship between landscape and urbanization is something that has been framed under the rubric of landscape urbanism. And this, I think, has come to mean slightly different things for different people. On the one hand, it's used as a way of addressing the way in which the transformation of the regions of cities, for example, or the question of the suburbs of certain cities, now necessitate a different understanding of the relationship between the large-scale territory and what was historically thought of as the urban core, as the core of the city. But we can no longer talk about the city in the way that we imagined historically, or we could previously, as a defined, bounded territory. So the question of what was thought of as the city is actually a much broader environment, a much broader territory, which is now we're dealing with this question of the urban as part of everything being part of this process of urbanization. So once you also, in a way, move out of what have been the traditional historic core of certain cities, you also encounter the domain of the suburbs, the domain that then goes to the regions. And this is where, for example, in the American context, people would be traveling by car from these places to the city. Now, we have to also recognize that not everything is now going to be part of the urban core in the sense that we imagine cities. So we still have to really deal with the problematic of the suburbs, of the problematic of situations where there is, in fact, more landscape, and we don't then experience, in terms of design, this idea of buildings in the sense of the urban fabric traditionally. So this is why in many places, landscape urbanism has been used as a way, as a mode of addressing the relationship between really the areas that maybe have as much greenery, as much nature, as much open space, and that the spaces are not as dense as the traditional urban areas. In another way, landscape urbanism has been used really in terms of the transference of methods or modes of thinking and practice from landscape and applied to questions of urbanization. By that, I mean that landscape architects, for example, have to think about the question of the seasons, the transformation that happens, for example, in agricultural territory between the winter, the spring, the summer, and fall. And each one of these seasons means a different level of the completion, of the finitude of the farming land and territory. Now, when we think about urbanization or we think about urban design projects, we often think in terms of phasing, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But for example, we don't think in this sense of the question of multiple finitudes, of how we can also design in our cities places that, like the idea of seasons, this is like a kind of analogical way, might have also similar conditions where we don't necessarily have to think in terms of only parcelization of the fragments of a site, but actually in terms of a larger territory that might have multiple conditions of finitude. In this way, we can also think about landscape urbanism not only as something that has to do with landscape a la parks or nature or outdoor space or suburbs, but also as a mode of practice.